Well, my name is Michael Carson, and I'm the Outreach Director for the Freedom Fighter Foundation. If you've made it this far, that means that you have some intent to finish this thing. And so that brings us to our last module, which is next steps. What are you going to do next? Now that you've found out what Freedom Fighter Foundation is about, how we have seen the gap, how we feel the gap, how identity is really gained, wounds, living a life transformed. That's really all of those things, all of the things that Jake and Shay just covered in the previous modules on all of those things, that gets you to this, which is the next steps. And let me congratulate you on reaching this step, because you now are in a place where you're ready to receive what God has for you. And I truly believe that. So welcome to the family. All right. So how and what do you do next? That's the great question. Well, that's where I come into play as an outreach director. So one of the greatest things that we have, and one of the most foundational pieces that we have in our foundation, is groups. Our Freedom Fighter groups are really the backbone, the bread and butter of what we have. It's what we establish. It's really the greatest thing that happened to me when I started going to groups. That's really where the true transformation started. Once I was set free, once all of those things happened, I got myself to a place where I wanted to learn how to walk in freedom. Now, the groups don't. The groups have several different ways to be able to do that. I'll get a little bit more into some of the things that we have in our events later on. But the groups is really where you start to establish some of the key basics that we need as veterans in order to really reach that transformed life that you heard of earlier. And in groups, what that does is that takes us through our combat trauma healing manual, our first responder healing manual, even when when war comes home. But these manuals are really they're ways to get us to the source. It's a resource to get us to the source. And really that's what you need. You need some training, you need some help getting yourself to that place and then learning how to walk in freedom. And that's what the groups establish. It's also a place where you'll get a mentor. You'll have someone who's going to walk with you through that process. But back to the basics of what we need, there's 4 key elements that we need when it comes to transformation. First, you got to feel safe. I know for me, when I was a veteran that was out on the streets, hooked on drugs, struggling with PTSD and depression, anxiety, suicidal, homicidal ideation, family was gone, pushed away everybody that I loved. In that time, the only thing that I was thinking of was really, where was I going to get my next meal? And where was I going to lay my head that night? I was in survival mode. I wasn't ready to deal with any of the issues from combat or pre-combat or post-combat, or just being in the military in general, any kind of traumas, even from being a child, things that I went through as a kid that had nothing to do with the military. And so safety is one of the biggest things that we got to have. We got to feel safe. And if we have safety, then that can lead to trust. And that's the next step. So first, you got to feel safe, right? And then once I felt safe and I knew that I was around some people who had experienced some of the same things that I had experienced, then I could start building trust with that individual, right? And that's really where your mentor comes in and your disciple maker comes in. They'll come and walk side by side with you. And that's where you start to establish that trust. And once you can build trust, then you can get transparent and vulnerable with what's really going on. Some of the things that were bothering me personally had nothing to do really with combat. It had to do with the fact that I didn't know how to be a good dad to my kids. I had lost the ability to be really anything. I was so lost, I didn't have an identity. And all of those things that didn't necessarily have to do with the military or combat. That's just stuff that was really going on inside. But I had to get to a place where I could say that. You know, a lot of people, when I first started running, when I first stepped into a group, I had a real good friend, a mentor that guided me through that. And I was telling him, hey, I got PTSD and you wouldn't understand what I'm going through because I got PTSD. And in that, what happened is he was like, yeah, well, I told a little bit of my story and he told a little bit his. And what I found out was, man, everybody in the room had that. Everybody in the group had that. And he's like, yeah, why don't you miss me with that stuff and tell me what's really going on with you? And see, that was a time when I could actually open up to him and say, I think I'm just, sad because I miss some of my friends. I really gotten to a point where I could reach that true trust. And he said, son, That's something that that's real, that's authentic, and that is something that we can work on. And so those groups helped me to get to a place where I could be vulnerable and transparent. I had safety. I built trust with that individual. I could get vulnerable and transparent with everything, and that started the transformation in my life. See, God could come in and heal those wounds that were deeper than just combat or deeper than just childhood trauma. I could establish an identity, the things that you heard of earlier. And once I knew that and it got authentic in those kind of things, I could be discipled in not only how to heal from my wounds, but to and find purpose in my pain, but I could also reach post-traumatic growth. Instead of having post-traumatic stress disorder, I now have post-traumatic growth. And that's what our groups do. They establish that. They get you a leader that can get you to that point where you can excel and come out of those dark places, really have God's light shine in on that, and man, it'll transform your life. So, next step, greatest next step you could do, get involved in one of our groups. Reach back out to us. We will put you in contact with an area leader. freedomfighterfoundation.org, or if you have an email or a phone number, reach out to that contact. Say, hey, I want to get connected with one of my area leaders. We will get you connected with them and start this process of getting you into a group, okay? So that's one step. One of the next things that you can do is you can get involved in one of our events, all right? We have men's and women's intensives that we run. One of my favorites is Men's Forged events. I love going to that. I love seeing what God does there. It's a 3-day event. You stay overnight, like-minded individuals, and man, it is an intensive. God shows up, and you cannot leave that place not transformed. I mean, it's just impossible to do. So if you want transformation, man, get to one of those events. They'll be available through your groups. We can tell you about the time frames on those. Typically, they run in the first week of January, or first weekend in January is where we run Forged. The women's intensives, we'll let y'all know. Just get in touch with us on those things. That's one of the areas that you can do. Another one is our wilderness intensives. We have wilderness leadership intensives. This is really where we build a lot of leaders, but the thing about it is you're already a leader. You are already a leader. The wilderness, you will not be able to lie to the mountain. You can't lie to the mountain. Can't cheat the mountain. And it'll bring out what's truly inside of you, but it'll help build you into a better leader than what you already are. So that's another great event to get to. The last one is our marriage tune-ups. This is where we take and just tune your marriage up, making it better than what it already is. It's for you, your spouse. You get on with other spouses who have been through some of the horrors that you've been through. You learn tips about how to be a better husband, how to be a better wife, and not just better, but how to be a biblical husband, how to be a biblical wife, how to instill that into your children to leave that generational legacy that we talk about so often in the Freedom Fighter Foundation. Again, get in contact with us though. Get you plugged into a marriage tune-up, we'll get you plugged into Wilderness Intensive, we'll get you plugged into a group. But you have to reach back out to us. Again, freedomfighterfoundation.org. Let's get you plugged in to your next steps, and thank you for watching our videos. So the importance of taking a next step is going to be, having knowledge is not the same. Let's just put it this way. If you don't take a next step, if you don't choose to take that next step, then you're going to stay stuck where you're at. If you're stuck, if you've tried all the things and you don't take another step forward, then you're just going to stay stuck where you're at. Taking a next step is one of the most important things that you can do in order to move forward into what God has for you for your future, for your children's future. So I would say the importance of taking a next step is if you don't, then you're going to stay stuck where you're at. And you don't want to do that because you know where your way got you. It got you here to these videos. So make sure you take the next step.